I've always had a bone to pick with the unaided consideration. Um,
Right.
let me know where I'm wrong. I think it's given by panels. Panels will respond either digitally or in a survey. Have you like what brands would you pick in this category? And like without any prompting, they should name yours. So that's like a unaided. So it's unaided. They consider your brand without you aiding them. Is that how it works? And like it, I wonder like who are these people that we're asking?
This is a good question. And I have to say, it may be different between B2B and B2C. I have not been on B2C side of things, and I know that is a whole different world. I think I can only speak to the recent study that my team has done. And we've partnered with the company that works very closely with decision makers within fintech and banking industry. And we have requested not to do a digital survey, which means, 10 minutes, somebody presses buttons and were they looking at it? Were not? I don't know. We basically asked for an interview based surveys where somebody from the company called somebody at the bank and went through the questionnaire with them on the phone, where
Nice.
they have collected some of the quantitative data, but also qualitative, right? Very specific answers, where and also they gauge like were people confused about the question, did we word it right and things like that. So to me, that was a more
Yeah.
real brand study, I think,
Yeah,
in a
that
way.
sounds like a premium. To be honest, is yeah, that like more
The
of like
sample size had to be smaller because of that, because obviously
Mm,
they can't call up, thousands and thousands of people. But again, we're a
yeah.
niche solution for a specific industry. So it worked for us. It probably wouldn't work for some larger consumer brands. Um, I don't want anybody calling me and asking me some questions about brands
Right.
as a
I
person.
think the way you're doing it, this sounds very viable. But that was my that's exact point. Like, how come no one calls me and asks me for my unaided consideration? Like, who are these people? So, but I think the way that you do it, where they're very targeted, they're actually prompting the people and making sure that it's not some sort of like, like trying to remove bias as much as possible. I definitely support that. Okay, thanks for that info. It's good for me to know.
Knowing what you know today about branding and awareness, Elena, like if you were to go back to startup world, would you still have that mentality of thinking of marketing as this direct response thing? We need to hit certain number of leads. Like leads is all we care about. It needs to be revenue. We see runway coming down the pipe, or because you have that knowledge now of being deep in that world, do you think there is a world where you would be able to like have a portfolio of bets in your marketing team at a startup where you do invest in like event stuff and branding stuff and it's not all short-term quick wins direct response type things? Like is that shifted your thinking a bit?
100% for
Yeah.
sure. I think I would. I think brand is everything, and I also do believe not thinking in this sub-zero way where it's either we do branding or we do demand gen.
Right.
There is an opportunity to do both, and not everything has to be expensive. Um, but I think like startup leadership needs to be prepared to
Yeah.
understand what branding is really about. You see some great startups and they probably invested very little money in brand awareness, quote unquote, that requires a proper PR company and campaigns and things like this. But they are founders super vocal, they have a podcast, speaking on conferences, right? Like I think brand building can take multiple shapes
Mm.
depending on the capacity and ability of the leadership team and the budget. But it's definitely a must. If a startup is not thinking of brand, it's a huge miss, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to smaller companies, it's heavily dependent on the team that you have in house. Like, are they creative? Are they like mission driven? Do they have the like sort of you know capabilities to convince people that don't know about you that this is a good brand worth trying out? I think that as companies get really bigger, brand almost takes on something where, we try to measure it with like unaided consideration, but the value of brand is like almost like hard to quantify because, if we all go into a room and say like, okay, we need to buy a CRM, everybody knows, like everybody immediately knows like two or three companies without even searching, and it's like that for most categories. So like how valuable is that brand? The other thing that I just saw on LinkedIn one time, which was super cool, was like the comparison between AEs at big brand companies to AEs at startup companies. And like it just went to show that the brand did so much of the selling for the AE. So their checks were just high all the time. And when they went to a startup, their checks like shrunk because you don't have that brand in the room, so to speak, to like sell for you. And that's brand, and that's like marketing. And this is the last thing I'll say. This is why like it's so hard to measure marketing. You know what I mean? Like this is why marketing measurement is such a contentious topic because you cannot. It's so difficult to quantify what value that brings. It's very valuable.
It is, but it is difficult to quantify in a way that is easily fits in a PowerPoint slide,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And easily traceable to say, well, if I give you this 50K, then in X amount of time, it's going to be something like this, right? I think it's probably not as simple, but I usually talk about, I usually think about it in a way of if you're a startup and you're asking money or you're raising money or you're investing money for demand gen, you're basically paying for contact information. You're paying for people's eyeballs on your side. You're paying for attention constantly, and this is what your investment is all about. But how much time are you gonna be paying for all of this? How much longer, right? You at some point you should, if you start building brand from day one as you paying for the eyeballs and contact information, your brand will kick in and you will start paying less for the same amount of eyeballs, for the same amount of contact information and things like this. The scale will tip. But
Yeah.
if you never consider brand, that you're just gonna continually burn through more and more cash and ask for more and more money for growth, and you're never gonna like. I don't see how profitability is in the future if you don't think of brand.